Welcome to the Blind Apex Podcast, where amateur club racers tune in to get faster.
My name is Khan John Turk, and on this episode of the Blind Apex Podcast, we're talking about God's chariot. Well, his chariot if he drove a German car, the Spec E30. Joining me is the godfather of Spec E30, whose garage contains an Aston Martin and a deuce and a half. Survivor of that new wall in the back of VIR, Carter Hunt. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Con. Thanks for having me on.
So before we get too much into your background, I know guys are going to want to know, you post a little bit here and there, but how are you doing after your encounter with the new wall, the IMSA wall at VIR?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It was an experience, needless to say. Some being kind of part of that fraternity now, for the good and the bad. A lot of guys have gone into that wall. I'm not going to really comment on whether it should be there or not because I don't know enough about it.
Right.
But some guys have gone in there faster than I did. Basically, I was going down the back straight at VIR. I've got probably 2,000 to 3,000 laps. I haven't ever counted them, but that's probably in the ballpark at VIR. And, we were in a good, tight Spec E30 battle, which happens a lot, which makes Spec E30 a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And one of the other drivers, I do believe, did not know that I was on his left and decided he wanted to be there and pushed me off into the grass, literally shoved my car with his off into the grass. And so I'm doing, we guess probably it was right at the end of the back straight. We had not touched the brakes yet. So we're doing probably 123, 24, something like that.
Okay.
And he pushed me off into the grass, and, I just was trying to keep the car straight. And the first thing I thought was, I hope I don't hit anybody, because the track, for those of you that aren't familiar with VIR, at the end of the back straight, there's a left kink. And I thought, okay, the track's going to go left, and I don't want to hit anybody because, again, Spec E30 cars race real closely together. Mm-hmm. And so I went across the track. I was just trying to keep the car straight. Went across the track, and you're actually kind of down in a bowl a little bit there, and so I couldn't really see what was coming. And I got across the track and thought, okay, that wasn't so bad. And then I looked up, and there was the wall. And there was no way I was going to avoid it. I probably slowed down a little bit, but not much. And honestly, I had a moment to think about it. I've never had this feeling in my life. I'm 57 years old, and I've never had this feeling before, thank goodness. But I really did think, I hope this isn't it. I mean, I got a lot left to do on this earth. Yeah. And then, after the hit, the tires did absorb a lot of the energy. And we think that I went from about 110 to 0 in about 8 feet. And so... Oh. Yeah, it was a jolt to the body. I had my visor up on my helmet because I was inside a closed car, and I wear some kind of real mild reading glasses when I'm driving and racing, and they flew off into the dash, and it took me a second. It's on if anybody wants to see it. It's the in-car camera. It's on YouTube, Carter Hunt crash. And it was a jolt. And I kind of took a second to kind of figure out what was going on. And then thought, let's go ahead and turn everything off. We don't want the fuel pump pumping. We don't want, anything like that going on. So I just, turned off the key. The engine was dead. It was actually shoved rearward and down below the car with the transmission. Okay. And so I think everything did what it was supposed to do in that regard. I turned off the master kill switch and then tried to get out of the car. And it's a four-door car. And we'll talk about, the different Spec E30 cars, in a bit, but different configurations. But it was a four-door, so the two front doors are shorter on the coupes. The two-door cars, they're longer. But the seat did move a little bit forward, just a little bit. The belt stretched a little bit. And so I had a little bit of trouble getting out of the car. I actually didn't go straight in. I went in at an angle to the left just slightly. So the right front corner took the hit and most of the hit. And so I was able to open the door and climb out. It took a little bit to get out, but I got out and I was basically okay. And, honestly, the safety gear did exactly what it was supposed to do. I had some bruising on my chest and my hips from the harnesses and the Hans device. I had some bruising on my chin and my forehead from where the helmet held my head because it was held by the Hans device.
Right.
And so everything, everything worked exactly as it was supposed to. And I never missed a day of work. I had a little bit of bruising on my right shin, where my leg flew up and hit a steering column support bar. But I was walking around and it was fine. And like I said, I never missed a day of work. I went to the orthopedic Monday, no broken bones, no anything. So, everything worked the way it was supposed to. And I feel comfortable getting back on the racetrack.
Good. I follow you on Facebook and, I haven't heard the entire story of what happened. I was on track and, coming around probably, I came around before, the safety guys had gotten to you, and I was wondering who the heck went over there. And then, I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 laps before we got a peek of the car. And then I was just worried about how you were doing because I've known you for 20 years or so. So, yeah, but I'm glad you're okay. You didn't break anything. It did what it was supposed to do. The wall is there so you don't catch the guys when they kink left and then they come back right. It's so you don't catch them when they come back right. I know why the wall's there. It's still a little scary,
Sure. I've spoken to a few other guys that have gone in there and maybe they could put sand traps or something to at least slow the cars down a little bit. Going into a wall at 50 is bad, but it's not nearly as bad as going at 100. And so, maybe some things can be done. I'll leave it to the guys that know a lot more about engineering and racetrack design than me to figure out, what's best.
Me too. I would think that would be a great spot to put a sand trap to slow everybody down, but I'm not a professional at that. So we leave it to them, the professionals. It did what it was intended to do. The only issue is it's a car eater. So,
Yep.
I don't know if there's a car that's been in that tire wall that's been salvageable, to be honest. Maybe the pro cars, like a tube frame front car that went in there and they just whack the front off and start over again. But Spec E30, yours didn't look so great. I didn't think it was coming back. So,
yeah, that one's done.
do you have another one in the works yet?
I do, as a matter of fact. There was a guy who had built, actually another Spec E30 racer had built a car for him, and he did some driver schools with it and did a couple of races and decided to sell the car. And so I bought the car and I put new belts in it. The belts were expired, so I put new belts in it, a new seat, and swapped the fire system over this past weekend. And so I need to corner weigh the car because we do use coilovers and you can corner balance the cars. So I'm going to do that this coming weekend. And then the next weekend, it's a long tow, 8.5 hours to Pitt Race Complex, which is northwest of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so we're doing the Spec E30 and the NASA National Championships races there in September. And this is a good opportunity to get up there and learn the track and also to test this car. It's a good solid car, and it's actually better than my yellow car in some regards. And so it's a good opportunity to get up there and first time on the track with a new car. You always want to have to kind of consider that a test session or test weekend. So we'll just kind of get up there and run it around a little bit, not too worried about where I finish, and just kind of work any bugs out that might come up.
Awesome. Yeah, I was hoping you were going to get your hands on a car again. There's lots of them out there, completed ones for sale, and apparently plenty of E30s still left in the world. I didn't know they made that many, but I see them all the time. So
They did sell a lot of street cars. Now, some of
Yeah.
these little street cars lived a tough life with, many owners and over the years, but they're
Neglect.
tough. Yeah, right. But they're tough little durable cars. And that's why I picked it when I started the series, when I founded the series. That's why I picked the E30 because they're tough little street cars and make good race cars.
Yeah. So before we get into the start of the series, give everyone your background in racing and what drove you into motorsports.
Absolutely. Yeah. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, not far from Charlotte, kind of the heart of NASCAR world. And I always had an interest in cars in high school, back in the 80s. And I read all the car magazines and enjoyed cars and motorsports somewhat. Didn't really have a real interest in NASCAR. And a friend and I were driving his Triumph TR6 back to NC State, North Carolina State University. And we saw an autocross going on. And so I said, let's pull in and check this out. And so we stopped in a big parking lot, people racing around cones in their street cars and some modified cars. And I thought, this is really cool. And so I joined the Tar Heel Sports Car Club, and they do autocrosses, and they're now doing some track days. They were not at the time. But I did that and did some autocrosses and then found out about sports car racing that I did not know anything about. And a guy came to one of our monthly meetings and said, you can drive your car on a real racetrack. And it was Summit Point Raceway. And I thought, this sounds like a lot of fun. And so I did an HPDE, high performance driving event, and just had a ball. I thought this is the greatest thing of all time and really felt at home. And then they decided after some time that I kind of have a knack for this thing. And so they asked me to be an instructor. And so I did that for a few years and then found out that people were taking little import race cars that they've built themselves to these tracks and racing them in an organized way. And I thought that sounds interesting, and bought a Honda Civic and started doing some racing with Sports Car Club of America. And
you had a Civic and you got rid of it?
I did. And here's why. I've got a good excuse. That was a wonderful little race car. It was a 1985 little squareback Civic.
Yep.
And it raced in improved touring C class, and I had a lot of fun and had some success and won some races, and it was a great little race car. But I got married and told my wife at the time that when the kids come along, I'll get out of this racing thing. And so I did. And sold the Civic and pretty much everything else, the trailer, all the tools, everything, spares, and got out of it for about 4 or 5 years. And then the kids were getting older and they're out of diapers and, they could kind of take care of themselves a little bit. And so I thought, I might want to do this again. And so I was thinking about going back and just doing some instructing, and was able to do that. And I asked a friend who was really into it then. I said, what's a good little track car that would be good for, that's not real expensive and durable and reliable? And he said, you might want to try a BMW E30. And I'd never had a BMW before, and so I bought one and started doing some instructing and track events. And you know how that goes. You do that again, and it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. But I kind of got that racing bug again because I had seen Paris before, as they say, and wanted to get back into it. So I decided, I wonder, Spec Miata was a big deal then and had been around for a few years. And I thought, I wonder if a Spec E30 class could be successful. And so I went to SCCA that I had raced with my Honda and asked them, I said, look, I'm thinking about this series called Spec E30. What do you think? Would you be interested? And they said, thank you, but we've got enough classes. We don't need another. And I said, okay, I understand. And so I went to BMW Car Club, their club racing division. Mm-hmm. And basically, they were very nice, but they basically said the same thing. We have enough classes. We don't need another. And I said, okay. And so I met a guy at this new racing series called National Autosport Association. And the owner, Chris Cabetto, it was called NASA Virginia at the time.
Way back when.
This is in 2003. And I met Chris and said, Chris, I'm kind of interested in doing this series. Do you have an interest? And He said, let me talk to the guys at the NASA National in California and see what they say. And they had some enthusiasm and said, this sounds great. And NASA was kind of just getting its legs at that time. And they said, we're in. We'd like to do it. And I said, great. And while I was forming the series and coming up with a rules package, I'd never done that before. A friend of mine said, there's a guy named Mike Mills in California that's doing a series very similar to this. You might want to reach out to him. And I did. And he and I emailed a bunch and talked on the phone a bunch, and he was going to kind of do his thing and I was going to do mine. But I said, look, why don't we do this, Mike? Why don't we build the rules? Let's use the same rules package. And therefore, I said, I don't think this will ever be a national thing. It's probably just going to be a region or two. It probably will never be a big deal. But just in case somebody moves across the country and, they've got a car already built, they can just immediately go right into from your series to my series because they were still two very distinct series. He said, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. So he compromised a little bit and I compromised a little bit and we came up with a good basic rules package. And not long after that, a few weeks later, he said, Carter, I kind of like your name Spec E30. And his series was going to allow more modifications. And so the cars were going to be more expensive. And whenever the cars are more expensive, you don't have as many people that can do the series, that can build a car.
Right.
And we wanted to get the car counts up. We've said in Spec E30 for many years, it's not about the cars, it's about the racing. That's kind of our tagline. And so he said, I kind of like the idea of keeping the cars more stock because I think we can get more people. And I said, that sounds good. He goes, can I just do Spec E30 here? And I said, yeah, absolutely, Mike. I'm doing this for fun. And, yeah, let's make this work. And so we worked together and so we over the years changed the rules a little bit. Mike had to get out of it because of a personal situation. He's good, I think, but he had a family situation, so he had to get out of it and understood. And so I managed the series for 11 years and had kind of lost a little bit of enthusiasm for all of that. And the series had grown so much. It was a lot to manage. And so NASA came to me and said, we've got a guy here that we think can help manage this for you and kind of take it over if you'd like. I said, thank you. Yes, that would be great.
Yeah.
That's good for everybody. And so the series has grown. We think based on the spec exhaust system, and not every spec exhaust has been put on a race car. Some people have built track cars that they kind of wanted their cars to be a Spec E30 car, or maybe, in the future build it into a Spec E30 car. But the spec exhaust builder has sold a little over 500 exhaust systems. So we think there are probably at least 400 Spec E30 cars that have built. And again, I never in my wildest dreams thought it would be this popular, but we've been very fortunate.
I see them all the time. They paddock real close to the Honda Challenge kids all the time, right across from us at Summit Point and VIR. So I get to see all of them. They're very, and we can get into the rules if you want, because they're a very basic car, at least from the outside. Looking at the outside, I actually don't know anything about the suspension. I just know there's no aero, and that's about it. You won't see them with wings and splitters, essentially. Correct.
Yeah. We again, I wanted to keep them as stock as possible to keep the cost down, and also to make the cars as competitive. We didn't want it to where somebody could, develop on their own in a wind tunnel a wing that would work better than anything else, and then just run away and leave everybody. We didn't want that. So basically, I said, let's say, unless the rules say you can do it, it must stay as it came from the factory. And so, I had a lot of suggestions in 2003 when I was building the first rules package about, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I said, no, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. Because here's one example. We have to use a stock exhaust manifold.
Mm-hmm.
And I had several people say, well, no, you should allow people to put an exhaust header on that flows better and the cars make more power. And I said, well, if you think about it, the exhaust headers for these cars, because I did some research on it, were about $600 or $700. And I said, if we're all turning a certain lap time and then we all install exhaust headers and we lower our lap times by a second a lap, what have we accomplished? I mean, we're all kind of still doing the same thing. We've just lightened our wallets by $600.
Right.
So I said, let's just keep these things stock and let's kind of see how it goes. And we've had to make a few changes in the rules over time because, these things get older. The airflow meters get a little wanky after time. And so we've got a new package. Some guys in Florida developed more of an electronic airflow meter versus the old analog type, and they work better. They're more reliable. I don't know if there's any real performance advantage, but they're just more reliable, and that's what we want. We want people to finish races and have fun. So, we've got stock intake, stock exhaust, manifolds. We've got a spec exhaust system. Early on in the series, some people were developing different exhaust systems. I said, no, we're going to go to spec exhaust. And some people got kind of got mad over it. And I said, well, next year, you've got a year, but next year we're going to go to spec exhaust. And there was so much chatter in the paddock during the race weekends. Well, I'm using a single exhaust. I'm using a dual. I think this one works better at low end. This one works better at high RPM. And that's not what Spec E30 is about. It's about everybody having the same car as much as possible, as is reasonably possible. And so I said, we're going to a spec exhaust, and we did. And after we did, those discussions went away. Nobody ever thought about it. Nobody worried about it. They just bought the exhaust system and put it on their car, and that was the end of it. And that's what we wanted. That was the goal.
So we talked powertrain a little bit because you got the stock intake, stock exhaust manifold, and a spec exhaust. In the rules, is there a horsepower cap?
There is. We do dyno the top three cars when possible, and 160.9 horsepower. We don't have a specific horsepower at a certain RPM, but it's 160.9 is the maximum horsepower. And we've had some guys break out. I actually did some changes to my engine, just routine. I put a new air filter on it. It was full of dirt. I didn't think about it after about 3 years. I put a new air filter on it, and new spark plugs and plug wires and distributor cap and all that stuff. Just kind of a good tune-up. And I broke out on the dyno, and they said, Carter, we have to disqualify you from. It was after qualifying, and I said, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they said, well, you're taking this pretty well. And I said, well, I broke the rule. I should take it. There's no other way to take it, And so they put me at the back of the field on that, starting that race. I did put a restrictive air filter in there and took it back to the dyno and on my own and ran it on the dyno, made sure it was below, and it was 158, and did the race. And I've left that, air filter in there since. And so, the cars all run pretty evenly, and that's what makes it fun. And that's why we do this is for good fun racing. And the guys at the front, I usually run top five, and the guys at the front, the guys in the middle that are, say, 8th, 9th, 10th, and the guys that are at the back of the field that can be 18th, 19th, 20th, they're all having fun racing with each other, and that's what it's about.
They definitely are. You guys are having a blast. These cars, we'll get into the suspension, but they have the gnarliest slip angles. I mean, I see it from my car, right? When I'm approaching some of the slower cars. Even the slower cars have the craziest slip angle going into turns. I'm like, how is the car not going to spin around? And they just hook up and go. It's wild. They're wild to me.
Right. Yeah. The cars they won't bite you. I mean, you can drive them at higher slip angles, I think, than some other cars.
Yeah. So when I was developing my new car, the first weekend I was out, I got put into Beast of the East. So for the non-Mid-Atlantic folks, it's just we reclass Sunday morning by color. So everybody puts a color dot on, and you're grouped by lap times. And I was right next to Jack Cabetto, and the boy was throwing that car around and making it do the craziest things. So I was just like, my car's planted, not squirrely, not squirming, nothing. And he's all over the place. So it was wild to see him drive.
Right. And those Cabetto boys, yeah, I've raced with Jack and with his dad, and they're both very talented drivers. They are brave, a little braver than I am, I think, usually. But they make it work, and they, like I said, are very talented, and they both run at the front. And yeah, these cars, you kind of have to grab them by the scruff of the neck and throw them around a little bit. But it makes it fun.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned earlier they're on coilovers. What is the coilover setup on these cars?
Right. When I started the series, I actually said, I want to just have a bolt-in suspension package where you just bolt it in and go. And I had done corner bouncing in the past and enjoy that. But again, I just wanted the cars to be simple and low cost. And so I found an H&R spring package that was really, more than anything, kind of a high-performance street package. And Bill Stein dampers and made that the spec suspension. And everybody used it, and it was great. The cars rolled over a little bit, but they were a lot of fun to drive. And after some time, this is, I'm guessing, but it was about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more than that, maybe 7 years ago, somebody proposed coilovers, and the coilover packages were very expensive, and I kind of resisted it. They asked me my opinion. I was not managing the series at the time, but they asked my opinion, which I thought was a nice thing to do. And I said, well, they're very expensive, and so the guys did some research and found a ground control package that is very reasonably priced. Some of the guys, understandably, were resistant, but I said, guys, this, not including we're going to keep the same Bilstein dampers, but this is just the springs and the seats and the coilover package, and it's less. Yeah, and I exactly, and I said it's less than a set of tires. So this really is very reasonably priced. And they said, yeah. And so we kind of tested some, and they asked me to go to a track with them and test some, and the cars drove great. They were a little bit more firm, not radically firm, but more firm for sure. And it kind of makes it feel a little more racy and more fun. And again, as long as everybody has the same setup, that's kind of the goal. And so we did that, and you didn't have to go to those. You could stay on the old package, which a few guys did, and I did. But it was kind of funny, Con. I stayed on the old package for about 3 years, and maybe 2 years. And, I kind of went from, finishing in the top 5 out of 20 cars to, kind of qualifying 7th, 8th, 9th, and finishing kind of 5th, 6th, 7th, that kind of thing. And I thought, I'm getting older.
Right.
I was about 54 at the time, and I thought, I'm getting a little older. Maybe I'm just not going to be as quick as I used to be. And so I went ahead and bought the spring package and the coilover package, and bought a set of scales and corner bounced the car, and went out, and the very next weekend I drove the fastest lap time I had ever driven at VIR, and I was back in the top 5. And it wasn't like I suddenly became a better driver. I was the same guy, So I have to give all the credit. I have to give all the credit to the coilover package. I think it showed how sloppy my car was, because, I drove it at the limit, and I was driving the car but it was just so much more balanced and adjustable. And it really was a good move. I'm so glad the guys brought up the idea of that. It was time to do it, and it works.
Yeah. Well, I say you run the risk of, say, H&R discontinuing that spring set or whatever. You guys are running standard springs, right? Like 2.5, 2.25 springs, or is it a different setup?
They're smaller diameter springs.
Okay.
It's a ground control package. You buy it from them, I think. I haven't done, I bought it.
Yeah, set it and forget it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a good setup. Yeah, it's on the Spec E30 rules package on the NASA website. If anybody would like to go look at it.
Yeah. My question is, are the spring rates, they're defined by the rules, right? The package is the package. You can't change the spring rate, right?
Correct. And I think everybody pretty much has been, in every series, when you get big fields, there's going to be somebody who's going to try to get an advantage and bend the rules or even break the rules. And and there may be some of that going on, but by and large, I think everybody's pretty much, from the suspension standpoint, like you said, set it and forget it. You buy it, you put it in the car, it's easy. It's been a good experience.
So the last bit, not the last bit, because we could probably get pretty deep into this, but the sway bars, are you guys running factory sway bars?
No, there is, and again, I put them in so long ago. I think it's in the rules package, and I haven't looked at the rules package in a long time because I built the car to the rules and I'm ready to go. But yeah, there is a restriction on the size of the anti-roll bars on the front. I think it's 21 millimeters, and the rear, we had a 16 millimeter, and everybody pretty much had that. But some of the cars were getting a little bit tail happy when the tires would get hot. Like you were talking about the slip angles, the tires would get hot, and the rear bars are adjustable. The fronts are not, but the rear bars are adjustable, so you can, kind of dial that out. But then some guy said, "Look, I'd like to put and again, don't quote me on the numbers, but it's like a 12 millimeter rear bar, which is a little bigger than the stock bar." Mm-hmm. And so, we made that legal as well. And so that made a lot of people happy. So without going too far on options, we do, again, want to make it so that people enjoy the racing. And so we did that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to make it fun still. And if there's a big enough group that's having an issue, managing an end of the car, and it's not an overly expensive part. What's a sway bar? $200. Right. Make it available, What about bushings and stuff? Do you guys have a spec bushing or bushing rules that you remember?
No, you can upgrade pretty much to anything. You can go solid mounts on, when I first built the series, I wasn't real sure how the cars were going to be able to handle, solid. And when I say solid, I don't mean like liquid gas solid. I mean like non-deflecting, like aluminum engine mounts. And some guys wanted those. And I said, no, let's go with urethane to start with. They're more durable. They're firmer. But I want to have a little bit of compliance there just because we're not real sure how this is going to go. This back in 2003. Mm-hmm. And we did that. And then the cars have been great. And so I've just kept those in the car. I mean, I've replaced them a time or two. Just because they do wear over time. And I raced the yellow car before the crash. I had raced it, I think, 17 seasons.
Oh, wow.
And so I had replaced the suspension bushings maybe 3 times. The rear subframe, I did put solid mounts in there, aluminum, and some guys are running solid mounts for the engines and the transmission mounts. And it was funny, I kind of hadn't thought about this in a while. I changed from urethane transmission bushings to solid bushings. I think they're like Delrin, something like that. And I started up the car and started driving it, and there was so much vibration in the car, I thought the engine was missing. The guys were like, I came in earlier, and they're like, what's up? And I said, I think I've got an engine missing. They're like, what are you talking about? What have you done? I told them. They're like, no, the cars just do that. The
That's
engine's
normal.
fine,
It's normal now. Yeah.
Yep. The new normal. So
yeah, the bushing changes can do different things. It's interesting, especially in what you feel. So you just have to be aware.
And we all have our own driving. Yeah, we all, exactly. The awareness is huge. We all have our own driving styles, Mm-hmm. I mean, it's even in a spec series when our cars are all running down the straight nose to tail and nobody has a real advantage. Somebody's going to be a little quicker in turn 10. Somebody's going to be a little quicker in turn 4, and so, that kind of makes it interesting. But the feel of the car, we try to make them as close as possible, but the feel of the car is a big part of it.
So basically, for the E30 guys, if you own an E30 and you want to race it, you put a cage in it. You need your regular safety equipment. We need the new safety equipment, which is the fire suppression. And then you need Bilsteins, the ground control coilovers, and a spec exhaust. And that seems pretty... and sway bars. Seems pretty basic.
Right. It's pretty basic, and we let, early in the formation of the series, right after I founded it and got it going, I thought, you know what, we've never had any deaths. We've had some big crashes and a few broken bones here and there, but, thank goodness, nothing serious. Because, when you're starting a racing series, you think about these things, and, I don't want to be responsible for somebody, losing a family member or something like that. And thank goodness we haven't had any of that. But I thought, I certainly don't have the expertise, and I don't need the liability of the safety side of it. And so I got with NASA and said, look, can you guys manage all that and make the requirements? And they said, yes, absolutely. And so all of those, the tubing sizes of the cages and all that, the design of the cages, that's all through NASA National.
Right.
Which I wanted that to be. But then, yeah, like you said, you buy the coilover package, the suspension package, the anti-roll bars, you buy, the bushings, the cage, of course, the fire suppression system, which I'm a big believer in, and had it before it was required. Had a Hans device before that was required.
Me too.
But yeah, just building the car it's very simple. And again, we actually are still, I think, I'm not keeping up with the numbers, of course, but I think we are still growing. I mean, we've got a very strong presence in the Southeast, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast is getting stronger, Great Lakes is getting better, northern and southern California have always had big fields. Texas, we've had a little bit. It's, it's like I said earlier, it has exceeded my wildest dreams. And, people ask me, they say, have you ever tried to monetize this thing? Or I said, no. Yeah, if anything, Spec E30's cost me money, but it's been great. I've enjoyed it. Whenever I go to the national championship, I always buy the drivers a nice personalized gift, each driver, and that's all out of pocket, because Spec E30 is actually an entity of an LLC that I own. So I actually technically speaking, I actually own Spec E30. And it was funny, after it kind of got its legs and started getting popular, because the very first Spec E30 race was at VIR, and we had 3 Spec E30 cars. And when we got up to 10 cars, we thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe how big these fields are. And we've had as many as, at regional races in the Southeast, they've had 40 plus cars. And at national championships, we've had almost 50 cars. And
wow.
And so, it was funny, Con, after about 4 years, when it really started growing, SCCA called me and said, this Spec E30 thing is really kind of taken off. And I said, yeah, we're real pleased. And they said, do you mind if we if we approve it? Is that okay for racing at SCCA events? I said, yeah, do whatever you want to do. It's fine. No problem. And BMW Car Club called me as well, or individuals asked me, hey, could we make it? I said, yeah, absolutely. I said, now most guys I think are going to race with NASA. I'm going to be straight with you, because NASA, they really have supported us from the very beginning, and it's been a wonderful experience with NASA. And they still support us, and they're a great organization. So I said, I don't think anybody's, you might get here and there. And I've actually done a couple of BMW Club races, and they were fun. But yeah, NASA's, really been our partner in this success story.
Yeah. It's just another opportunity to get some track time, right? So another opportunity to have a race. So
right.
Why not let the other folks go in other sanctioning bodies and still race the same class, essentially?
Yeah, exactly. I've had a few people reach out to me recently that where NASA's not real strong in that part of the country, but SCCA is, and they've got like 10 Spec E30 cars now, racing at SCCA races, and it's just good for Spec E30 and for the drivers, and so we're good with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't see any problem with that. So the last part of the car is the tires, and you guys recently made a change from the Toyo RR to the Maxxis. What fueled that change?
Well, it's interesting. NASA has had a real good relationship with Toyo for some years, and when I was managing the series, they changed the tire model, still within the brand of Toyo, but they changed the tire model, and I didn't know anything about it, and I was still managing the series, and I kind of found out, during the big announcement, and I was not real happy about it. And it's not an ego thing, Con. It's a, guys, you should keep me in the loop on this thing, and I can keep a secret. They have to be kind of careful about how they do these things, and
that's when they went from the RA1 to the RR, right?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. And so
you should have talked to the Honda guys. They had the skinny and were spreading rumors real fast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, so they did that change, and so I sat down with Jerry Kunzman, who started NASA National, and I said, Jerry, we need to talk about this thing. What's the deal? And he said, look, I'm sorry, we didn't really handle this right with you, Carter. We really should have consulted. He was very cool about it, very upfront, and said, let's talk about this, and we got it worked out, and everything was fine. Now with the recent change from Toyo to Maxxis, I had no idea that was going to happen, and I ironically had just bought a brand new set of Toyos, wets and dries.
Oh.
And because the RA1, we're still using as a rain tire, because it was a good, reliable, solid, predictable rain tire. And so I had just bought those, and so then they went to Maxxis, and I think there were some issues early. They did some testing with some guys, I think in California, because that's where NASA National is based, and so that makes sense that they would test out there. And they said that this was a good deal and it was going to work, and all was good. And then they kind of introduced it. And I think with any new program, there are going to be things that pop up. It's like building a brand new race car, right? Things happen that you didn't expect and didn't anticipate, and so there were some issues, I think, with the Maxxis tire at first, but I think they've changed some things, and what I'm hearing now, my crash was in March, and so I haven't raced this year. But from what I understand from a lot of the guys, the Maxxis, the tires are, the lap times are about the same. Mm-hmm. And some of the NASA regions said they wanted to continue with the Toyos, and, but they wouldn't do it at the national championship. And I said, guys, we really need to all be on the same tire. Okay. Because, again, the tire, as you know, Con, you've raced long enough to know that the tires make a huge difference. And that's not what we want in Spec E30 is differences. And so
right.
I think everybody pretty much is on board with the Maxxis tires, and I think they've gotten them better. They've gotten them to where they are a little bit more predictable. They don't come apart. They last longer. All that kind of stuff. So I think it's, I have no idea what the contract is. I don't know if there's a certain number of years they're going to do it or what, but I think it's settled down and things are better now.
Yeah, I just know I definitely wouldn't want to have 3, 4, 5, 6 events on RRs and then buy a couple sets of Maxxis and head to nationals and think I was going to do okay, So
right.
It just doesn't seem logical to me to go, oh, well, we'll come to nationals with Maxxis. Like you really want to run that tire, learn that tire, because there were some teething pains. The guys that I know that race Spec E30 in the Mid-Atlantic, they were groaning and grumbling, and then they kind of figured out the sweet spot, and then they're not complaining anymore. So it's
right.
Change is hard. So everybody complains about change. So
yep.
Well,
that's true.
Yeah, that's awesome. So maybe I don't know how to pose this question outside of you're building you bought a sort of built car, but what does how much does it cost to build in a Spec E30, and what are the used Spec E30 prices these days?
Right. To get on track, and again, I raced the yellow car for 17 seasons, so I haven't built a Spec E30 car in a long time, but I've got a couple of parts cars, that one's a 4-cylinder car, which is not eligible for Spec E30, but, it's got all the stuff on out the body because these cars were all built pretty much the same. Basically, the E30s were sedans, 2-door coupes. Although other than the doors, the cars are exactly the same pretty much. There are a few little lower panels and some things that are a little bit different in some of the early cars, but basically a 2-door and a 4-door, the only difference functionally is the number of doors. They had a convertible, of course, as well. And somebody proposed making the convertibles eligible, and NASA adopted it, but aerodynamically, the convertibles are not very good, especially at high speed. And so I think a few guys built them, but then I think they've pretty much gone away. So your choices are 2-door or 4-door. My yellow car was a 4-door, which I kind of prefer just because, if you need to get in the back of the car, you can, we take all the interior out, but if you need to change something or add something or even, just open the back door and turn on the video camera and close the door and go around and hop in the car.
Right.
It's just easier in that regard. Because whenever you put a cage in a car, the back seat is just pretty much,
it's gone.
The back seat area is pretty much gone. So, in this new car, I'm swapping the fire system because the fire system was in the trunk of the yellow car and it survived and it's fine. And so I swapped it over this past weekend. And so I had to kind of snake my way through the cage. And at 57 years old, I'm pretty fit, but at 57 years old, you kind of have to, it was a little something to get back in there, but, to get all the nozzles mounted in the car, one in the trunk, one over the top of the driver, one under the dash, and then one in the engine compartment. And so, having to snake back in there was a little bit of a thing, but, other than that, there's no real advantage to a 2-door versus a 4-door. The car, if you build a car, and these are going to be some pretty broad numbers, but, you can buy one. E30s, you used to be able to buy them for, $500, a running car for $500 that looked bad and had a little rust in it. And, but now these cars are so popular because I've got a little silver sedan, 5-speed street car, and every time I drive it, somebody wants to buy it from me. And, they're so popular. The high school kids love them. College kids love them. They've really got this cool following, which makes it kind of fun, having a E30 race car. But if you buy one, that's in decent shape, you're going to pay $2,000 or $3,000 for it probably. I've seen them sell for as much as 10 or 12 that were really nice cars. But, you can pick one up for probably $3,000 or $4,000. And to put everything on it, if you can build it yourself, you have to, get the cage done. The cage is, I'm guessing, $2,500. So now you're up to about $6,000-ish. And then you're going to put another probably $3,000 to $4,000 worth of stuff in it. The suspension, performance parts, fire suppression system, seat, mirrors, just, everything that you need to get on track. So you can get on track for about probably $8,000 to $10,000.
Okay.
And a good car that has been built and has, and most of the time when you build a car, you can't sell it for what it costs to build it. But Spec E30 is kind of the opposite. A good car that's solid built, has all the good stuff on it, goes for $12,000 to $15,000.
Okay.
That $1,000. So, it's still what we would call an affordable race series, or race car build.
Yeah, that's way more reasonable than my car, but, so what's some, reliability issues, some things people need to look for in their E30s or address before they go wheel to wheel?
Right. I'll start with the one component that you absolutely want to replace every 2 seasons, and that's the front lower control arms. They will break, and I had one break at Watkins Glen during the national championship on me one time, and I stopped before I got to the wall, so that was good, and was able to take a spare and stick it on the car and finish the weekend. But the lower front control arms, they will break. The ball joints break after about 2 seasons. or after about, actually, it'd be probably after 4 seasons, but change them every 2 just to make sure.
Right.
Um,
You guys don't have press and ball joints?
We do not. We do not, but they're not expensive. And so there's that. One thing that we have found is that the front subframe that all of these parts bolt to, that bolts to the tub, subframe bolts to the tub, there is a weak part on it. Now, it took 15 years for this to kind of start showing itself. But, you pound these cars off the curbing, and, some street cars got pounded off curbing, I'm sure, and also on the racetrack. And so the front subframe, some people have developed little weld-in tabs that reinforce the weak areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something you want to do. This car that I bought has not had that done yet, so I'm going to have that done for sure. But I'll tell you, Con, other than that, I mean, the car the yellow car that I raced for 17 years, I raced it for about 3 or 4 years, and then people were rebuilding their engines, and you can do a 20 thousandths overbore rebuild with new pistons, and that's it. And that's basically a street rebuild, and it gets you about 7 to 8 horsepower, which, in a spec series, that can make a difference. And when the horsepower is so low, 7 to 8 horsepower in a 500 horsepower engine is nothing, but, to these cars, it's a big deal. And I had Mark Welsh in Danville, Virginia, build the motor for me, and I never rebuilt it. I pulled the head one time and did a little bit of a cleanup on it, new valve stem seals and a few things like that, probably at about year 10 of the 17, and put the head back on, new timing belt, do timing belts every 3 years, and that's it. And that engine, the lower end of the engine, has never been touched in 17 years. And again, I had a win last year, and I had a win the year before, so the engines are very reliable, and the cars are too. I mean, it's basically brakes and tires. I go to AutoZone and buy rebuilt brake calipers, turn in your old ones and get the new ones, and they're like $50 a piece, and bolt those in. They just basically, clean out the bores and put new O-rings on them and new little dust boots.
The dust boots,
Yeah, just put those on, and you just bolt those on and bleed the system, and you're good to go for another 3 or 4 years. So, the cars are just simple.
I remember early on, and maybe it was a fluke, maybe it was only a couple guys in Mid-Atlantic, but they broke rocker arms in the engines on the top end.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure somebody had spares, and they just threw them in there, sort of did a lash, and started racing the next morning. So they're pretty stout, simple. So
Yep. Yeah, I used to carry, and I think I still do, in the bottom of one of my plastic bins in my 24-foot enclosed trailer. I think I've still got some rocker arms, but in the 17 years of racing that yellow car, I broke rocker arm. I think I broke one at Road Atlanta, and we swapped it at the track. It was kind of a deal. I mean, it was about a 4 or 5 hour job, but we swapped at the track, and like you said, we pulled out the feeler gauge and set the lash and finished the weekend. And I haven't broken one since. So,
yeah, something that happens, but not something I would necessarily be worried about. And with all you guys out there, I'm sure there's some spare rockers laying around somewhere, like you said, in the bottom of a tote somewhere. So,
right, exactly. In our 20 years of racing Spec E30, I've given away 1 or 2 at the track and used one myself, and that's all I've ever done.
Yeah, and you guys have lots of random spares anyway. It's the bonus of a spec class, so it's good for those folks who are new.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the new racers, we love having new racers. When I started out, I was in my late 30s, and in Spec E30, I had raced before with the Honda, but in Spec E30, I was in my late 30s, and there were some older guys in the field, and now I'm him. I'm one of the senior racers. It's been a great experience. One of the greatest things of my life. Well behind my kids being born, but it's been from a hobby standpoint, it's been a great experience. And yeah, we love having new racers, and the guys the veteran racers really will. I think some of it's because they don't really see the new racers as much of a threat yet. But we support each other. We have lunches together. We'll race hard, and at the end of the day, we'll crack a beer and do some bench racing and have a lot of fun, from a social standpoint. And with big fields and everybody racing the same car, basically, mm-hmm. Somebody's always got a lower control arm. Somebody's always got a rocker arm. Somebody's always got, a spare airflow meter if yours is failing, and you can just swap it out and they'll let you use it for the weekend. It's a wonderful group.
Yeah. I know I've watched James Hauser come up from when he first started. He struggled with his car. I was getting dyno tuned the same time he was set up to get on the dyno to sort of get it a baseline reading of where his engine was and things like that. And now he's podiuming and getting in the top 5, and he's having a lot more fun, but he's worked hard to get there. And you have a rookie, Liv Willis, who was on the show talking about social media marketing. She drives a Spec E30, and she loves it. She loves it to death. She thinks it's the greatest thing ever. So you guys really have a good community going, and you guys have had that community going for 20 years now. So congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, well, thank you, Con. I appreciate that. I honestly, when this thing started, I had looked at other racing series, and I thought, okay, it's 2003. First race is going to be in 2004. I actually founded the series in 2003 in the fall over the winter, no racing. So it was a good time to get the rules package started and all that. And I thought, we're going to, hopefully it'll grow, and we'll get some decent fields, and we'll probably get a good 6 to 8, maybe 10 if it stretches. 10, it'll probably peak at about year 8 or 10. And then, new cars will come in and it'll kind of fall off, and then we'll get down to where, the cars aren't really worth anything because nobody wants them. And the series will probably just kind of fade away at probably year 12 to 14. And we're on year 20 and we still have great fields. I think the fact that it's an outstanding platform, that has a big part of it. Those old 80s BMWs are just, they've got a following and people love them, and there are E30 streetcar clubs everywhere. And like I said, the high school and college kids love these cars. And I think that has really helped us, but it's proved to be a solid platform. I give BMW engineers a lot of credit. They really designed these cars well. And yeah, you talk about James. James Hauser. He's really come in. He's a solid driver. He's got a good car. He's a contender, and good for him. It's good seeing people have some success like that, and new drivers. Yeah, we encourage people to come in, and I promise, the water's warm. Jump right in, and we'll take care of you.
Definitely. So, one last thing I wanted to talk about was any tips or tricks, because I see some of the cars run a plastic-ish bumper and some of them are running metal bumpers. I don't know what the preference is. I know I saw a metal bumper bent at a 45-degree angle hanging off the front of a car last event at Summit. Got a little close to somebody, or somebody got a little close. I actually think they hooked bumpers, but and his mounting lost. But you talked about it didn't matter between the coupes and the sedans, other than access to the rear, which as a coupe driver, a Honda coupe driver, I have to crawl through my trunk, which then I had a weld-in strut bar. So I have to fit my not skinny self between the body and the strut bar. So I understand the whole crawling in cars thing.
Right.
But outside of that, are there any other things people do or prefer that somebody should look out for?
There are kind of two schools of thought on that, Con. The aluminum bumper cars, the early E30s, they had to meet bumper standard with the federal government here in the United States. And so the European cars, and I think other markets, always had smaller bumpers, but in the U.S. they had to put these big, they call them diving board, big aluminum bumpers, and they're big and they're heavy. And so some people say, you know what, I like the big bumpers because, you know, we try not to hit each other, and there are rules about contact, and you can be disqualified and
bump drafting is consensual.
There's a little bit of an agreement on that, you know, and but yeah, so some people say I like the bigger bumpers because, you know, they're more durable and blah blah blah, but you're also hanging a lot of weight out away from the center line of the car, you know, from the middle of the car, and so, you know, the car doesn't turn as well, and, you know, that kind of thing. Some people say that, and some people say, you know, that's why I like the smaller plastic bumpers, because they came on the later cars. And we actually allow people to switch back and forth, and I've actually switched back and forth. The plastic bumpers do get cracked and banged up a little bit, and they're hard to find, and you know, you can repair them, and like people do. So that's just kind of the two schools of thought. Some people say I want the lighter bumpers, and some people say I want the heavier, more durable bumpers. I wouldn't say there's a real advantage to either one. It just kind of depends on what the driver wants personally. But other than that, I mean, like I said, the coupes, the 4-doors, there doesn't seem to be any advantage there. The convertibles, there does seem to be a pretty distinct aerodynamic disadvantage.
Yeah, that shouldn't ever have been a consideration for those folks, but people do what they do.
Yep. And I was not a fan of it.
Did they ask for like a 200-pound weight grace or something? Because they're going to need something to make up for that parachute.
You know, I don't. Right. I don't know all that wind whipping around in there. Yeah, I don't know exactly. I think, you know, that's all the same for all the cars. And so it's extremely rare to see them now. They, you know, a couple of guys built them a few years ago, and they just kind of disappeared, I think. But again, I don't think there's anything, you know, about any type of car, any specific year. 87 to 91 are the eligible years. Has to be a 325i, the straight six. And again, I can't think of any real advantage to any, you know, specific car.
I bet all those convertible E30s got turned into drift cars. They probably have LS swaps in them now.
Yes, that makes sense. Yes, or big turbos bolted on them or something.
Yeah, through the hood and stuff. Yeah, that's
right.
fine.
Exactly.
You can do that to an E30 convertible if that's what you want to do. That's fine.
Yep.
But you're not going to have fun at Road Atlanta, or even the back straight of VIR is you're just going to get eaten alive back there. But
yep.
All right. I looked up the social media and where to find Spec E30 stuff because I didn't know how active you were on social media with them. But you can find Spec E30 folks on Instagram at spec_E30. The rules and a forum, as forums are mostly gently used these days, spece30.com. And as Carter mentioned earlier, the most up-to-date rules you can find on the NASA racing website. So I think
that's correct. And also, if I may,
yeah,
we do have a fairly active national Spec E30 Facebook page, which guys get on there pretty regularly. And I think that some of the region Spec E30 groups have their own Facebook pages as well. So that's something, if you're in a certain part of the country, that you know, you can look those up as well. And you know, again, people want to help you out, ask any questions, and you'll usually find answers at any of those places.
Yeah, I showed up to test day, and there was a Spec E30 consistent podium driver going over data with one of the rookies. And I thought that was kind of cool because you generally don't see that, you know. Sure, maybe that rookie won't be a threat this year, but when you're teaching them and you're teaching them what to look for in the data, they're coming. And they had no problem doing that. And I think that's kind of cool. So,
Yep. Yep. Yeah. That's it's and I know a lot of other series have this as well, where it's not exclusive to Spec E30, but we do have a good group of folks that really want to help each other out, and that makes it a lot of fun.
Most definitely. Well, I think that's a wrap. Unless you have any other parting shots for those Spec E30 folks or potential Spec E30 folks. I really appreciate you coming on. I know this is our third, fifth something attempt. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, Con. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to listening to your future podcasts as well. Thank you for inviting me.
Until next time, keep working on yourself, keep working on the car, and let's get faster.